Alright, so welcome back. I hope you're doing well. This video is going to be a pretty short video, but it's just going to go over some basic things between modern Greek and biblical Greek. I want to go over some of the differences that you'll find. So if you're familiar at all with modern Greek and you use that as a study tool, I highly recommend that you study modern Greek and use modern pronunciation so that you can study modern and biblical Greek alongside each other. And it sort of just opens you up to more resources for learning the language. So that's one of my suggestions. So because I have that suggestion, I think it is pretty helpful that you understand some of the differences between modern Greek and biblical Greek, because there are a few that would catch you. If you didn't have someone explain you these differences, they might be pretty difficult to spot on your own and to work your way through. So I just want to go through some of these. We'll go through some syntax differences, some of these transitional words, and some similar words between the two languages or the two forms of Greek, and then some final tips and takeaways. So the first thing we'll go through is just a few of these syntax differences. You'll notice something in biblical Greek that happens that doesn't really happen in modern Greek or any other language I've ever seen. You got all these words, they function like transition words in English, like the word for, the word so, the word therefore, but you'll notice that it's always the second word of the sentence or the second word of the clause, and which is kind of strange. But once you've seen that, you will find that this is very, very common in New Testament Greek. So if you ever studied the basics of New Testament Greek, you're gonna recognize a lot of these. The first one is gar, which is the word for. Probably the most famous verse in the New Testament is John 3:16, and gar is the second word of that clause. For God so loved the for God so loved the world. Some other examples here. Just to go through them real quick. For the man is not of the woman, but the woman of the man. You see, God is the second word of the clause here. For they were afraid. This is a case, it's very rare where you'll have God is actually the last word of the sentence as well as the second word, because it's only a two-word sentence. So it's a rare thing to happen, but it can happen. It's a complete sentence, but it does happen there. Imisgar esti idoxa imon keichara. So this is for ye are idoxaimon, our glory and our joy, and joy. So in this case, God is the second word of that clause. They. So if you study modern Greek, you probably will recognize this word, but it's not going to be the same thing that you see in modern Greek. In modern Greek, this is actually the way that you would negate a verb. So to say someone is not running or not walking or not doing something, you would use they or then. Whereas in biblical Greek, they is actually an and or but kind of a conjunction. But it'll be the second word of the sentence. So you'll see here in some examples, clearest in this third example here, because it actually got translated as and. So, ide ipon αυτό en Bethlehem tis Judeas. So, and they said unto him in Bethlehem of Judea. So you have this clear example here. They is the second word of the sentence. God is the second word of the sentence there. It's adding on to or furthering what came in the chapter before it. So saying, and when Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea in the days of Herod the king, this prophesied, promised birth was going to happen. But, so that's where this one, but when Herod the king heard these things, he was troubled. So there's this contrast idea. So a lot of times it's either an and or a but is the best way to translate that. So un basically means so or therefore. It's kind of a logical conclusion. For example, so then in this case is how it's translated. So what then the advantage of the Jew, and you have to understand the verb is, what then is the advantage of the Jew? So un is sort of what, therefore is the advantage. So ligozometa un pisti. So therefore, there's the un. We conclude logizometa, that a man is justified by faith. So therefore, we conclude that a man is justified by faith without the deeds of the law. Nomon un. So do we then make void the law? Law, therefore, is made void through faith. And he says, God forbid, but we establish the law. The law is established. So that's basically saying, therefore, kind of a conclusion thought. But it's the second word of the sentence. But you'll get really used to it once you've seen a lot of these. Then you have what they call men de construction. So on the one hand, on the other hand. So you're going to have a clause. You're going to have a clause that the second word of that clause will be men. And then the second clause will come, and the second word of that will be they. So the men will be on the one hand, and that will be on the other hand. So some examples here. So ego men baptizo imas. So I, on the one hand, baptize you in water. O de opisomu. So on the other hand, the one behind me, or the one coming after me, is greater than me. So that's what John the Baptist is saying. He baptizes in pneumati, in spirit, agio kepiri, so in the Holy Spirit and fire. Okay, men epithodo. So that is, and some on the one hand believe these things which were spoken, and some on the other hand did not. So that's kind of that's sort of the way to understand this. And some believe these things which are spoken, and some believe not. This men and they has the sense of, on the one hand, some believed the things that were said, and on the other hand, they didn't. Some didn't. Elias men erkete. So that is Elijah, on the one hand, is coming first and will restore all things. On the other hand, legoimin, on the other hand, I say unto you that Elijah has already come. So those are some examples of syntactical differences you'll find between modern and biblical Greek. So a couple other words. I'm not going to give any examples of these. It's just, I'm going to tell you, if you've studied modern Greek, na is how you introduce these subjunctive clauses. Ina, or hena, if you use a Raspbian pronunciation, it's the same exact word. The pronunciation and spelling has changed over time, but it works exactly the same. So it's this kind of, this was done so that something else might happen. And that something else might happen kind of clause, that's the way that you should think about subjunctive mood. So if you've ever studied Spanish or any other language that has a subjunctive mood, well, that'll be a lot easier to understand. In English, we have subjunctive. So if I say, if this were to have happened, that were to have happened, that is a subjunctive clause. Anytime you talk about things that are hypothetical, things that are desires, wishes, desires, hypothetical situations, those types of things are subjunctive. And so you introduce that type of clause with the word na in modern Greek. In biblical Greek, ina is the same thing. Same thing happens with the word if. Ean is the word for if in biblical Greek. It's just an in modern Greek. So when you see them, they're equivalents of each other. Diati, for what reason or why, works just like the word porque in Spanish. Diati, it has become yati with a gamma in front. Identical type of thought, and function is just spelled and pronounced slightly differently. And then meta. So In modern Greek, meta means after. And in biblical Greek, meta means after as well. But in a certain mood, I think it's with the genitive, meta will mean with. Whereas in modern Greek, the word for with is just me. The ta drops off and it'll function just like the word with. So those are just some examples I gave that I came up with. Here's another one. Yos means sun. In modern Greek is yos with the gamma. So it's pronounced pretty similarly, but the word changes. These types of things are small. You'll probably intuitively grasp them without having to be taught those things, but it's nice to just have someone point them out. So just some tips on studying. The way to progress is to get consistent practice and study. I like to say to target at least an hour per day. And especially in the beginning, the more progress you make very quickly, the more likely you are to stay motivated and stick with it. It's really fun and enjoyable whenever you're progressing in the language. But if you're not doing it every single day, you're not going to progress very fast, and it's going to be easy to just sort of give up and not really stick with it. So when you're doing over an hour a day, consistently every single day, that is when you're going to start seeing progress. I think you should get exposure to both modern and New Testament Greek, especially modern in the beginning, but New Testament Greek for sure. And then as soon as you're able to do it, you should transition to moving into things like fiction books and movies, because that's where you're going to start gaining your vocabulary. Grammar study only after becoming an intermediate. That's something I also recommend. Getting grammar before you have a base level understanding of the language. It's like basically teaching someone the rules of a game they've never seen played, that they're trying to visualize these things as they might be. But if you start getting into the language with something like Duolingo and Link and language transfer, and you start getting that kind of an understanding of the language, and then later learning grammar, the grammar will suddenly clarify things that might have been up in the air before. And then stay motivated. You got to visualize yourself accomplishing your goals using the language, and being competent in the language. You got to visualize that. Take feedback, reflect on your performance, how well you're doing, how fast you're progressing. But understand it's a slow process, because it takes years. It takes years to learn the language. And, if you enjoy the process and make consistent progress throughout your learning journey, it will be extremely enjoyable, and you will start seeing the fruits of your labors there. I look for new techniques. Always be thinking about ways to be more efficient and better at learning the language, and then set goals. And then, don't be too ambitious with your goals, but just set realistic goals for yourself, and then do the things that will put you in motion to achieving those. But anyway, that's the end of the video. I appreciate you watching, your attention. If you have any questions or questions about resources on things getting started to learn biblical Greek, or just questions about Greek in general, I will do my best to answer those if you have any questions. But I do appreciate you watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching, and God bless.